All right, can y'all hear me okay? Perfect. All right, I want you all to think back to your high school English classes. Specifically, I want you to think about the books you're assigned to read for those classes. Some of you are probably thinking of classics of 20th century literature like The Great Gatsby, To Kill a Mockingbird, or 1984. Others are probably remembering 19th century classics like Wuthering Heights, Crime and Punishment, or Frankenstein. Many of you are probably shuddering at the very thought of the most terrifying man to ever grace an English syllabus. William Shakespeare. But do you want to know what I'm willing to bet most of you aren't thinking about right now? Any book released after the year 2000. People my age are reading a lot of the same books that were taught in English classes 25, 50, 100 years ago even. And have you ever wondered why? Why we have this small collection of classics, this in-group, that we study over and over and over again when hundreds of thousands of new books are published annually? You would think, just by sheer probability, that at least a few would make it into the rotation every year, but instead we're stuck with the same small catalog of books. This is down to the fact that as a society, we have built a wall. We have constructed this barrier between classics and non-classics, or, in other words, between books that we deem worthy of study and those that we deem unworthy. If we want to evolve and grow as a literate civilization, we need to discard this barrier, because when you seriously stop and look at it, it's made of nothing but styrofoam and duct tape. In order to explain why, we first have to answer a very simple preliminary question. What even is a classic? It's one of those words we just kind of throw around nowadays, like literally or ironic, without too much care of what it actually means. Most places define a classic as a work with established and recognized artistic merit. Now, setting aside for a moment the question of who is recognizing this merit, be it the public, academia, both, neither, Tim from accounting. What is artistic merit? It's a very important metric in discussions like this, but it doesn't have a solid, satisfactory definition. The best one I could find was that it's a measure of the artistic quality of a piece, but that's an entirely different can of worms. Now, we're trying to judge art, an inherently subjective medium, on an objective scale of quality, and that never ends well. See, all of this confusion surrounding what has merit, what doesn't have merit, what merit even is, why we're even using merit in this discussion, it all boils down to one simple fact. All art has merit, because merit is nothing but an author's intent to say something through their work. Let's look at this specifically in the context of literature. Just because a book has its protagonists fighting dragons or alien dragons, it doesn't mean that the author isn't trying to say something. It doesn't mean that the work is without merit. In order to prove my point, I want to play a little game. How's that sound? Alrighty. I am going to give you all two quotes, and your job is to figure out which one comes from a classic piece of literature and which one comes from a book I just pulled off my shelf. You see, the trick is, according to the current educational system, you should immediately be able to tell which is which, because one is inherently worthy of study and the other one isn't. You ready? All right. Quote A is, "And when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." All right, that's quote A. Quote B is, "We readers and we creations, we don't just decide what it looks like, we decide what it means." Okay, you've heard the quotes. Time to place your votes. Drum roll, please. Da-da-da-da-da-da. If you said that quote A was the classic piece of literature, you would be correct. That comes from The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Quote B, on the other hand, comes from The Revisionaries by A.R. Moxon, a book that I'm fairly confident in saying most of you probably haven't heard of. But does that make the book worse? The fact that you probably haven't heard of it? The fact that it's never going to show up on a college reading list? No, it's the same book, regardless of whether or not it's going to show up in an ELA textbook. What if I told you that the character who says that quote is an anthropomorphic cat pretending to be a priest who turns himself into multiple pairs of sandals. I'm not kidding, that actually happens. Does that diminish the quote at all? Does that diminish the book at all? If anything, it adds more layers to it, as now we are able to further dissect the author's intent. Now, I can already tell from up here that a few of you are leaning over to the person next to you, just like, okay, what do like cats and sandals have to do with school, like at all? Well, thank you for asking, hypothetical audience member. See, as much as I hate to say it, people my age just don't read as much. Multiple studies have been conducted by organizations such as Gallup, the Pew Research Center, and the American Psychology Association, and they're all in agreement. My generation just doesn't read as much as previous generations did. Part of this is down to the fact that we have more alternatives nowadays. Sure, we could crack open a book, or we could scroll through TikTok, binge Netflix, look at our friends' stories on Instagram, any number of things on our phones to give us instant gratification. But that's not the whole story. Because fewer people are reading at home, more and more students' first experiences with truly understanding and digesting literature come from the classroom. And as amazing as authors like Shakespeare and Hemingway and all the rest are, if I wanted to get someone hooked on reading, I probably wouldn't give them Hamlet or The Sun Also Rises. No, I would probably recommend them something more along the lines of Percy Jackson, Good Omens, or Murder on the Orient Express. Not necessarily newer books, but books that are, for lack of a more eloquent term, a bit more fun. Because if you can hook someone, if you can get them invested in adventurous stories of heroes and villains, of magic and monsters, then you can prepare them to better appreciate the more cerebral classics later down the line. Now, I want to stop for a moment and make it very clear that I in no way, shape, or form want to come off as if I'm bashing the classics. I love the classics. I've seen multiple Shakespeare plays performed live. I'm a massive fan of Ray Bradbury, and I was that weird kid in middle school who read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for fun. I'm not trying to replace the picture of Dorian Gray with 50 Shades of Grey. I just want people to understand that every classic we have today started life as just another book on a shelf before someone gave it the chance to be more than that. All I am asking for is for us to give that chance to more books. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Instead, every school year or each semester, we can work in one or two non-classics, just to spice things up and get kids more interested. Imagine a semester spent reading Faulkner and Orwell that's capped off with Harry Potter. But something like this has never truly happened before, and there's a very important reason for that. The study of the classics is a self-perpetuating cycle. It all started hundreds of years ago for many of these books, when someone looked at it and thought, I think there's something worth studying here. And so they did. And the more they analyzed, the more they found to analyze, until eventually we ended up with a small collection of books whose mountains of interpretation and analysis stretch as high as Everest. But now, when a new book comes along who could potentially have just as much, if not more, to analyze, more to say, we immediately compare it to Everest. We quite literally compare mountains to molehills. And therefore, the educational system almost always goes for the older classic instead of giving the new book a chance to let its mountain grow. In all seriousness, the reason I'm up here tonight is because what I'm seeing in the world right now is a tragedy. People are being frightened away from literature, and not by book bans or claims that they contain immoral material. No. They are being frightened away by the very system that is designed to foster a love for literature. By placing so much emphasis on these established classics, the educational system leads students to think of books in terms of grammar structure and syntax, as opposed to the wonder and the magic that they actually consist of. English class shouldn't be about telling students here, read the good books. It should be about introducing them to the wide, wonderful world of the written word and teaching them how best to engage with it. This barrier between classics and non-classics limits the potential of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of students every single day by refusing to expand their literary repertoire. On that note, I have one final challenge for all of you out there. I want you to go to your local library, your local bookstore, and I want you to pick out a book you've never heard of before. The weirder and more out there the premise, the better. And I want you to read that book as if it were a classic. If you give that random book the same level of respect that you would give to a Shakespeare play, I can guarantee that you'll walk out with a different perspective on things. And for those of you currently working in education, it's my hope that the next time that you sit down to write a lesson plan or plan out a set of guidelines for a county, that you keep in mind the importance of novel novels. My name is Jerry Williams. Thank you very much.